Good morning. My name is Sanjay Grover. I lead the oil and gas tax practice for Ernst & Young LLP in India. I've been associated with the upstream oil and gas industry for the past 32, 33 years. And it is indeed my pleasure to interview a luminary today, and thanks to COVID, which it may not have happened. I don't think a person who needs an introduction in the oil and gas industry, Mr. Jarand, Rystad, CEO of Rystad Energy. So, Mr. Rystad, if you could, although you don't need an introduction, if you could just say a few words about yourself, I think that'll be far more accurate than myself. Over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you. Just let me first start to congratulate Rina Sunder with this front-runner project and the Modern India, and I think it's a very kind of exciting initiative she's taking there. So then about myself, yes, I have a background as a physicist, actually, from my education. When I was a student, I also worked as a programmer and did a lot of simulations, and basically that has been my craft for the rest of my life, where I've been using this in scientific research in a McKinsey company, but also I started up this company, RightSide Energy, in 2004, to basically simulate and try to get our arms around the entire energy market to understand on a very detailed level what is happening. So today we have 20 offices globally, and we are helping clients to basically understand the global energy market. So that's a short story about me and this company.
Oh yeah, indeed short. And I do understand that you have an office in India also.
Yes, we have, yes.
Yeah, we'll come to that later. I'm very keen to find out how your experience as far as India has been, but we'll pick that up later. Coming to COVID and the implications of COVID. Obviously, COVID has led to a lockdown and brought most of the economies to a standstill. IMF is saying that this is likely to result in an as bad economic downturn on a worldwide basis as compared to 1930. This is obviously likely to affect the demand of energy, but what do you see? How is this likely to impact the world energy dynamics vis-a-vis?
Yes. I think it will be about short-term, medium-term, and long-term consequences of this. So, of course, short-term, that is very kind of visible for us all. Basically, oil is used to move people around in the world. And the whole purpose now of the COVID is to stop moving people around, both by airplanes and by cars. So we have seen the biggest shut-in ever of global traffic. So we are monitoring this city by city globally for about 1,500 cities. And we see that actually traffic levels were down approximately 50% globally. It seems to bottom out in the middle of April, and it started to come a little bit back now. But basically, this means that that we have a demand destruction of almost 16 million barrels for road traffic alone. And then for aviation and for industry and all the others, we have another 12 million barrels of demand destruction. So we have a record high and unprecedented situation that we have a demand destruction of 28 million barrels of oil in April. We think that we will get some of this demand back in May, June, and July. But it will also be some lasting effects. But you also see on the detail, we see some nuances, because public transportation is not very popular these days. So actually some places you start to drive more cars rather than using public transportation. But then in some cities again, the roads would be too crowded. So then they actually close some roads to open them for bicycle traffic only. And this is just illustrating how this is actually leading to some structural changes also in the cities. So if you take the positive view, maybe it could make people even more healthy because they are kind of forced to go back to bicycling because taking a car is not an option due to traffic congestions, and taking public transportation is not an option due to the risk of contamination. So this is just some short-term view, but basically international traffic is going down by 90% almost. It's basically all business travels is cancelled, and also travels, holidays are cancelled. So the only transportation you have It's actually people that need to permanently move from A to B because some family situation or something that they want to move from one location to another and stay there. So that's why we see this very, very dramatic drop in global aviation. And I think this will be a lasting effect, even if business travels, etc., will come back to some extent. People will learn to use video conferences and other means of communication much more. They will get used to it. So I think the threshold to do a business travel will be higher. So that I think forever we will see lower global aviation going forward. It used to grow by 10% per year. Now it's maybe flat or just a slight growth from a new level. So of course, well, I don't know which level we are coming back to, but maybe it's at 60 or 70% of what it used to be pre-corona. That remains to be seen. So this is the short-term effect. Medium term, I think that actually energy prices will go up very much because we're investing far too little now, which is again leading to a stronger position for the green technologies, because already coal-fired power plants, they're struggling much more with the economy and with the execution of the project than solar plants as we speak. And if all of these projects are delayed 2 years, then the new competition between solar and coal, for example, then solar will have even a stronger position. Meaning that long term, I think actually this will speed up the green shift.
Interesting. So you're actually saying that because of the lack of investment, oil prices probably would stabilize or even go up. Coal
yes. Yes, every year we are doing a lot of infill drilling globally, and that is to replace about 15 million barrels of well level decline from all the previous wells. And then we're having new wells replacing that. If we are shutting in a lot of this or stopping a lot of this infill drilling, the starting point, the global capacity will go down. So maybe if you're able to handle, if you get a vaccination, if you're able to handle the virus, let's say in the middle of 2021, and we're starting then to get back to normal, still we will struggle then to maybe get the global production levels above 95 million barrels or 96 million barrels, and then we see price fly-ups, which again will kill demand. So so the new starting point, the new capacity roof will be probably lower than we see today.
So Mr. Rystad, obviously the oil prices have dipped. They were anyway low because of low demand, and COVID has actually killed the demand, as I would say. Partly this has been the result of the political scenario on a worldwide basis. That is the producers not having to agree, what to do. So the issue is the dip in the price. Besides, because of the result of the dip in demand, is it because of lack of coordination amongst the producer countries, or is it based on a specific strategy of these entities? And secondly, US, so as to say, has recently, or rather is a new introduction to the oil market as far as the producer is concerned. It used to produce probably about 20% of the oil production which is done by Saudi. It's producing more than what Saudi produces. So what do you see? I mean, how do you see these dynamics playing out as far as the oil economy is concerned vis-a-vis the world?
Okay, that's a big question, but let me start then to look a little bit about what has happened the last decade, because partly this is just prolonging and strengthening some of the trends that is already in place, and partly this COVID situation is introducing something completely new. But I think until 2012, the main situation globally was that US had a declining production. It was down to 5 million barrels per day. It used to be, in the 1970s, in the beginning of the 1970s, clearly US was a big power in terms of energy. It was an energy superpower. But then it was declining, and it will become more and more reliant on the Middle East for its security of supply of energy. And that was the expectation that this will continue to be like that. And the prospects for oil prices was very high, very good long term, because new resources was even deeper water, even more complicated reservoirs, etc. So the easy oil was gone. And the notion was that we had to see very strong prices, and this will strengthen the Middle East and Russia. And the prospects for OPEC was very, very bright in a way that they will have the ability to prosper from energy dominance for the next 2 to 3 to 4 decades. Who knows? That was the narrative. And then suddenly shale came out from nothing. Surprised the world. Overproduced, had the fastest growth of oil production ever seen. And in 2 years, it flooded flooded the world with too much oil. And oil prices collapsed. People then hoped that the US was gone, that this was not able to compete on these low prices, but they were very dynamic market. So supplier prices came down, energy, the efficiency went up a lot. They drilled much longer wells with much higher sand injection, etc. And it was a big comeback for shale. And again, that was threatening OPEC and the prices. And then OPEC understood we cannot do this alone anymore. We have to get everybody else to join us, at least Russia and 10 other countries like Kazakhstan and a few other countries. Even Mexico, they wanted to join them to make this new super OPEC to OPEC plus. And then actually they managed to get an agreement in 2016 to try to regulate the market, to fight against United States. But it was a quite big tension between Russia and Saudi Arabia, especially because it actually is a big pain for Russia to shut in fields because they have very low productivity of the wells. So they have a low pressure support many places, so they cannot really be very dynamic in regulating the market like you can in Saudi Arabia. So it was always coming with a pain, and eventually they saw that when they did that, they just helped US forward. So that's why I think these countries together, they failed to agree in the beginning of March, when still the effect of COVID was not very visible. And Saudi Arabia, they say we will cut, but we require others to cut as well. And if the others don't want to cut, we will flood the market rather. We will have a volume strategy rather than maintaining the price, because in the long run, this will serve us better. So that's why we got these two shocks at the same time. Flooding the market with too much oil due to political reasons, to just show strength and show that we're committed to the strategy we have, and then complete failure of demand, complete demand collapse. So we ended up with a kind of a perfect storm, and prices into the negative, as we saw in the BTI prices, in Americas. So that's where we are now, and it will be exciting weeks going forward.
Interesting. Oil kind of, I think, affects every aspect of the economy worldwide. So there's so many variables involved, and a switch in any one or change in any one of the variables has impacts one can, even not fathom where it's going to go. So, do you see any similarities between the situation that is there now and the crisis that have happened in the past? Knowing that today's crisis obviously is something completely different, but do you see any similarities, and therefore can we have some learnings from the past crisis?
Yes, I think so. You must always try to learn from history, but also, as I said, there is normally the oil market is balancing on the marginal 1 to 2 million barrels. So in this time, it's 20, 30 million barrels. So it's unprecedented. I mean, it's an order of magnitude different. But still, we have had actually in the beginning of the 1980s, it was declining in global production for 3 years, 9 million barrels in minus. That was then where Saudi Arabia learned to protect oil price from taking down their own volumes. So I think they at least still remember the 1980s and how they then had a wrong strategy to try to just stop production to maintain the prices, and that was not sustainable. So, but I think, well, whether the crisis will be V-shaped or L-shaped or W-shaped or whatever, it's speculations and debates about that. But as I said, I think it will be a V-shaped deep crisis in terms of consumption. We will have a comeback, but then it may be more a square root shape, that you actually will start on a new lower level, because this will impact some structural kind of behavior, like I already commented on in terms of aviation, etc. Yeah, some reflections at least on this.
Okay, so I'm gonna test some of your the forward-looking prophesizing skills. Where do you see the price of oil going in the next maybe 12 to 18 months?
First, I think it can go even lower, because suddenly we are coming to a situation where we are running completely out of storage. And when you don't have storage, at a certain point, you have very expensive transportation, and you just need to get rid of the oil. And on extreme cases, for a very small share of the market, but still you can even get pay to get rid of the oil that you already have, because the alternative will be even more expensive for you. So, but this just, what I mean is that we can see very low and very volatile prices short term. Then I think it will stabilize on a slightly higher level, because then we actually will have some production shut in, and this oil will no longer kind of compete to get into the market. And so then we will have a new level. And then when consumption is coming back more and more, you will actually suddenly struggle. Then you can empty the storage, because you have all the storage is filled up, all the inventories. But when that starts to be emptied and you still see demand growth, then you will start to suffer from the lack of infill drilling. And then we will see maybe a price fly up. It could be $100, but that is more towards 2022 that we expect this to happen. And then in 2022, with the price fly up, people will drill like crazy. Still, it will take time until the new volumes are in the market. But after 12 to 18 months, meaning 2023, 2024, suddenly you have a new flow and overproduction, and you have a new price collapse. Basically, we are simulating this in mathematical models, and we see then that we have actually 4 years cycles. So we get a completely shut in or down, for example, in 2020, 21, high prices 22, 23, low prices 24, 25, etc.
Since you prophesied that the oil prices are going to go up and down, and the volatility is going to be very high, what do you think developing countries should do in terms of investing in the oil and gas infrastructure for local production of oil? Today, the oil price is very low. It doesn't make sense to invest. But if you prophesy that the oil prices are going to go higher, then it makes sense to invest now to actually reap the benefits when the oil prices are higher. So how does one look at that?
Yeah, first of all, if you think that you have more resources in a country that you want to get into the market, that's a very long-term project. It basically takes you normally 10 years from when you start to think about opening new acreage until you actually have the first find. And then another 10 years from the first find to the first production. So it's almost like, for example, if you have a big shelf, let's say outside southern India or some places that is not really well explored, then it could take actually 20 years before you start to get the production. So that's much more than the cycles that I just talked about. If you have onshore prospects where you have already seen production and you have a proven petroleum system, as we say, where you have the source rock and you know where the oil is approximately, then it could take shorter term. But the dynamics now is that actually the green shift is likely to happen before all these oil basins are open. So now it's a rush, it's a race to open, and it's actually more acreage available than it is companies to produce this. So that's why governments need to compete with attractive conditions to attract oil companies to actually come to their country and explore for oil and develop and produce this oil. So this is what we see now. That is not like it was like the mindset was 10 years ago, that if you had these resources, you could just lean back and everybody would kind of like to compete to get into your position, and you can put up very high taxes, etc. No, I think it's the opposite situation, due to the peak oil demand that we expect all of us, and due to the shale and the competitiveness and capacities related to shale. So yes, of course, it could be an idea also as a profit in itself to open up for local exploration and to find oil in any country. But it's a lot of competition here also. And I would rather actually than if I was a government invest heavily also in renewables, solar power, etc., because that would at least maintain, make sure that you get the energy you need for power consumption in a sustainable manner. But then you have to regulate this also in a proper way, not to take too much acreage, etc. So, but that's another story.
Interesting. So, coming closer to where I am, you've actually done a report recently, I think about 2 weeks back, on the COVID impact of on the energy sector. Where do you see the Indian scenario? How is it likely to impact the energy sector in India and the energy dynamics in India? It's not going to be very different from other places.
No, basically, we have studied in the last report we published this week. We went down to county level in many countries to see what is driving the spread of the virus. And dense cities, public transportation, a lot of commuting in and out of cities is driving this. We see that in all the European countries, basically the capitals like Madrid, London, Paris has most cases, up to triple the normal death rate. So that COVID alone is causing death that is 3 times higher than the normal death rate. And the most actually affected places is like Bronx, Kings, and Queens in New York, where we actually see up to 8-9 times higher death rate. Up to 8-9 death people per day per 100,000 population versus normally 2, so meaning 4 times higher. So this is one driver. Another driver we see was actually that we saw that there were some carnivals in Europe in February and some ski destinations. And in connection with these festivals, we actually saw a lot of that these regions remained as the most intensely affected regions. For example, in the Netherlands, and regions like North Brabant and Limburg is still suffering from this. We have also seen religious festivals that could be the cause of big outbreaks. So I think this is at least one learning, that we should avoid all kind of mass gatherings like this. You have to be very, very cautious to see these kind of things. So to the extent that has happened in India over the last 4 or 5 weeks, I think that would be a particular place to analyze, to see, because the effect is coming 3 to 5, 6 weeks later. So just know that should start to be visible. So I think countries, they need actually to try to suppress the virus and wait for the vaccination. I think that is a better strategy than actually just let it come, because then you will get too many fatalities that you could have avoided if you had a slower speed of the spread of the virus. Yeah.
So you did mention just now, the COVID is obviously likely to have a significant impact on various kinds of energy consuming industry.
Yeah.
Coming to India, I think other than airlines, which is an obvious, where do you see the changes happening in terms of energy consumption? So you have LNG, you have LPG, and then you have, as I said, ATF is going to drop, which I believe which will not stabilize in the real short term. So just wanted your thoughts in terms of the specific.
Yeah, we have done some observations on this. That of course car traffic and aviation is most affected, as you already mentioned. But in LPG, basically everything you're using at home is increasing, and everything you're using in public places is decreasing. And the net effect could actually go either or. So I haven't seen recent numbers from India whether actually LPG consumption is going up or down. We saw in China in February, LPG consumption was actually down quite much, because Chinese people, they like to eat at restaurants, and they often have double cooking, both at home and at restaurants. And when all the restaurant sector was closed down, you saw that LPG consumption came down quite much. So that was, it was all the storage for LPG was filled up in China in February. Whether the effect in India is opposite, maybe, I don't know, that maybe you're consuming even more LPG at home, since everybody will be at home for a while. So it will be exciting to see, but at least these are some differences. And of course, when you have also workplaces closed down, you will see, to some extent, less consumption from the industrial sector and the commercial sector, because people are not working and producing things, and then you don't need that energy consumption, of course.
Yeah, in fact, just for your information, I did see a report which said that the LPG consumption in India has actually increased because of
Exactly.
the shutdown.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
been a significant increase. And plus, I think even the government is pushing very hard for the use of LPG as compared to the
Mm.
other kinds of fuels because it's
Yeah,
much
yeah,
healthier.
because it has a positive impact on the local air quality, for example.
And a significant population of India because it leads to a lot
Mm.
of collateral damage, so as to say, health issues and a lot of wastage of time. Yeah, interesting. COVID has actually thrown up a very challenging choice for government. So you have life versus livelihood, and which is, I think, which is being debated all over the world. Um, the populace is saying open up because economies are going down. The government
Yeah.
obviously wants to, in some of the cases or in large number of the cases, actually wants to restrict opening up because that will help contain COVID. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think you have to find a balancing situation. I think what the first need governments had was to see if they could control the virus, to stop the spread. Because if you don't control it, you will actually just have exponential growth until almost the entire population is infected. And then you will run out of intensive care capacity by a factor of 10 maybe. So that's why this is a situation you don't want to be in. So you have to try to limit it from growing. And then, so we have seen that all countries in Europe, also America, and other places have actually seen the peak 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. Some countries are still growing. So this is the first thing to see that you actually have the control. But then you are freezing down the economy. Many people where you have not too good welfare systems start to actually struggle to find the money from food even. So it could be a quite desperate situation for many people. And then so we need to open up, and then we need to find this balance. Then you will have some outbreaks come back, but also you have now educated population to keep more social distance. So we have changed some behavior. So people are not kind of grouping together in big crowds at the public transportation or at cultural events or religious festivals or whatever anymore. They will have this, so it will spread slower. So I think actually governments need to continue to monitor this, try to keep the outbreak as low as possible, but at the same time keep vital economic functions in place. Maybe Norway could be a good model because we are now gradually opening up and we have actually very low numbers. We have actually not any kind of increase of the normal death rates. Actually, we have slightly lower death rates, mortality rates. So you have some positive effect. Of course, you have less traffic accidents, etc. Then you have less smaller traffic, so we have actually fewer people dying than normally. But still, we are now maintaining some of this economic activity, getting a lot of that back, starting to get to the hair cutter and things like that also. So so I think that we will learn to normalize energy consumption, come back to a certain extent. But it will be much more restricted life than we used to have for the next 1 to 2 years. Much less international travel, much less cultural events and arrangements with a lot of people.
Much less eating out and therefore lower consumption of LPG.
Yes, where that is an important part of it, like in China. But we see that it's gradually coming back. And as I said, some places it will even surpass, especially road consumption. Could be higher than it used to be because people are avoiding public transportation.
So, you mentioned about Norway. Norway obviously has 2 benefits. Number one, its population is very, very low as compared to some of the developing countries. And the population density is very, very low because of low population, and therefore, you don't have too much of crowding, so as to say. So that helps from a COVID spread perspective. But countries like Norway and countries which are principally dependent upon oil revenues, although Norway is in a good position where it's invested wisely. What do you see is going to happen with such low oil price and so much of volatility, but with an expectation that the prices will go up, as you said, maybe in a year and a half or 2 years?
Yeah. No, but of course, we are in a very fortunate situation in Norway because we have, investment funds, etc., that we can draw on in this downturn. and we know that the market will come back. We are actually a very generous government that are supporting small businesses and medium and big-sized businesses also to survive this crisis, despite a steep drop in revenue. Still, there are actually oil income. Normally we have like 350 billion kroner in income from the oil sector. Maybe this year it will be less than 100. We see that globally it's actually going down from $1.3 trillion in income to governments last year. This year it will be about $0.6 trillion, $600 billion. So still quite some income to the governments, because the taxes are not only profit taxes, because profit will be very low, but it's also royalties. But clearly, oil-dependent nations, they need to cut their national budgets quite drastically this year and next year and going forward. And I think actually some of them adjusted the public consumption to the levels in 2012, 13, and 14. And I think these years will never come back. So they have to cut, I think, nevertheless, quite drastically in all kind of public consumption.
So, there I think lies the issue that the government revenues are going to fall by trillions of dollars. They're going to have less money to spend. And therefore, the consumption is likely to go down.
Yeah.
And if the consumption is likely to go down, is that likely to result in a huge fall in the demand of oil because of the lack of revenues with the government to be able to invest?
Yes. Some of the high growth nations globally, like many of the OPEC countries, oil price is a driver for the economy that you just talked about. And which again influence the global economy, like you indicate, with lower growth of the global economy. But on the other hand, many of the consuming nations, they are benefiting from this low oil price. And actually then they can spend less on oil and energy and more on other purposes, which is actually growing the economy. So it actually is going both ways, this situation. Usually it used to be a very good thing for the global economy that oil price was going down, because you got more excess cash than for other to spend on other things than energy. But since I said many of these nations now are the most important growth nations, it's actually working both ways. And also we have this inflation situation that since the oil price is going down so much, global inflation is going down, and in many countries it's a threat that inflation becomes too low, because you cannot put the interest rate lower than you already have. And so then you are risking having these kind of deflation ghosts, that you talk about in Japan, etc. So this is actually also some of the problems with the very low oil prices. But I think that impact, it's some impact on the global GDP. Longer term, it will be bigger than this short-term direct impact that I talked about with aviation and cars, etc. But so it's a complex picture.
Yeah, interesting. So the next thing which I wanted to actually speak to you was that, way long back, I read this book by the name of Death of Distance. It basically explained how internet penetration completely shrugged the world. COVID has kind of, done the opposite. Nobody's traveling, nobody's doing anything, and everybody's sitting at the same place. As a result of which, the technology penetration has gone up substantially. You are sitting in Norway, I'm sitting in India. We could do that before COVID, but now because we are forced to lock down, we are doing it far more often, and it's starting to become, life, so as to say, normal. Do you see that level of technology penetration happening in the oil and gas sector? And do you see that having a significant impact on the oil and gas sector as a result of technology arising out of COVID?
This topic of digitalization in the oil and gas industry has been a topic for many years. And some people have had a kind of a revolutionary kind of concept here that they think that this will revolutionize the industry. I've always been more a kind of reform perspective, that it will slowly and gradually make some few improvements. But of course, improvements means that you just start to compete on a different level. So I think it's more meaningful to talk about, for example, digitalization in shale versus offshore, etc., and who will do that fastest, and how is the competition within the oil and gas sector. I think it's actually been a lot of disappointments. People were promised that you will have big improvements, and you have only seen very small improvements. And in some cases, you haven't seen improvement at all. You have seen that the cost of the digitalization has actually been higher than the benefits that you gained. But like all areas in the world, I think we will continue to have gradual, slowly improvement with digitalization. I don't see the big revolutionary shift that we, for example, now see in communication. As you just pointed out, we are just talking now much more on these digital platforms rather than traveling. And this is a revolutionary change over the last 2 months. So I don't see a similar quick change.
Yeah, because obviously the buzzword today is, and the expectation today is that technology is likely to have a significant change on every industry. So it's interesting to hear that you believe that it's going to result not in a drastic change, but it's likely to have incremental change on the industry. So before we kind of wind down, I wanted to actually find out from you. You have an office in India, which we started off with. So just wanted to find out how long has it been there, and how has your experience been as far as in India? And last but not the least, why did you open up an office in India? Do you think from an oil industry perspective, or from an oil world perspective, India is an important place for everybody to be there?
Yes. Well, to be honest, when I quit McKinsey 15 years ago, started my own company, quite soon another colleague from McKinsey called me and he said, I'm opening a office, or he was from India, in Pune, and he said, do you need some services from me? Because, I can offer very competitive services. I have a petrophysicist hired here, so they understand oil and gas industry. And I said, well, as this was a startup company I had to look at the cost picture, and I said, let me experiment a little bit. And I got a similar offer from Bangladesh, actually, from Dhaka. So I started to actually pay these 2 offices to deliver services to me. And over time, it developed in a very positive manner, especially in India. Actually, we shut down this Dhaka office after some years, but we continue to have this relationship with this India office. But at a certain point, he made some structural changes, and we took over all the employees that were actually working for us directly, because we were so content with them. Very high quality people, very clever in what they were doing, but they are primarily helping us to build up the database and the programs and all the technologies and the content that we have. Over the last few years, we have also increasingly seen India as a market. So we are currently doing projects now for Indian governments, for example, in terms of looking at different aspects of the oil and gas industry and the energy industry. So, and clearly the single nation that will grow energy consumption the most over the next 2 to 3 decades is actually India, more than China. Growth will be larger in India. So clearly, if you are an energy analyst company, we need to see India as a big market for services of analyzing the global energy industry and benchmarking global energies, and of course helping local communities build new energy systems like green energy, etc.
So would it be right to say that, if you are in the energy business, it is probably a prerequisite to look at India because of the growth dynamics as far as India is concerned? Would it be right to say that?
Yes. India is a most exciting market, and of course India is primarily depending on importing energy, oil and gas. It's very expensive for India to import gas, but what they have locally is coal, but that is not, that has a lot of issues. But it also has a lot of renewable resources that could be developed. So it's very exciting opportunities in India in terms of energy. So it is going to be more and more, I think, an energy hub with both import and export of energy. And already you have a very, very healthy refinery sector with leading global refinery hubs, for example, that you're exporting the products to the rest of Asia. And so I think this is just one example of how India will have more and more important role and also as the most populous country in the world, just now surpassing China, is also of course of great importance. So you cannot be in the global energy business to claim to be a global company if you don't have a presence and activity in India.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for giving us time for this interaction. Some very interesting learnings. For example, the price of oil is likely to fluctuate. Demand and price is likely to fluctuate. Significantly over a period of time. Challenge for actually explorers and people in the oil and gas sector in terms of how to handle this volatility. Interesting to learn that renewables are going to be far more in fashion, so as to say, as compared to fossil fuels. And I think the oil industry has always been an industry, an interesting industry to watch and see. And I think it will continue to be, because it is such an important component of the entire world that it just cannot be ignored.
So but it will also change the geopolitics. That because oil used to be the kind of the source of energy dominance and the source of power globally. When you have 30 years from now, if you have much more renewables, it will be much more kind of democratically spread. So it will not be the same source of power due to energy dominance. So that's also changing some of the geopolitics, which I think is also quite interesting to see this shift.
Okay, sir. Well, Mr. Rystad, thank you very much. It is indeed a pleasure to speak to you. And unlike, I am a little old school of thought. I would rather prefer to meet face to face rather than digitally. And I hope I get an opportunity to meet you sooner rather than later.
Hopefully we will. Okay. Thank you.
Sir. Bye.